Hello everyone and welcome to this 3 Colors Up. In this one we're going to be tackling the Chiha tank for Bolt Action. This is one of their plastic kits. Now, I've never done Japanese infantry or Japanese vehicles before, so this is kind of a bit of a first for me. But in essence it's still a tank painting tutorial, so you're going to get what you expect from a tank painting tutorial. Bit of chipping, bit of weathering, some of those nice enamel washes from AK. All of that thrown in there. It does become a little formulaic, but it works. And if it works to a standard that I'm happy to play with on a tabletop, then it works, and that's just the way it's going to be. So, Chihas. Not the best tank of the war. Not the best tank the Japanese built. Really not much of a very good tank at all. Has some weird design elements in it. Some particular engineering decisions that were made that makes it just that little bit finicky, that little bit more awkward than what Western tanks would have been, or Russian tanks would have been. So it really is, and I believe I said at the end of the video as well, it's very much a relic of the 30s. It's very much a relic of interwar tank design and tank deployment. It's not very fast, it's not very heavy, it doesn't have the biggest gun. Now obviously they upgraded it a little later on to make it a little bit better, put a different gun on, put a different turret on, and yeah, it was okay for the war that it was designed to fight, which was the whole island hopping stuff. You weren't expected to face a lot of enemy armor at the time, because during the interwar period everyone was using small light stuff. The Soviets had the BT series, the British had the light cruiser series. Let's see, what were the Americans playing with? They were playing with the M3 lights. Was it the M2 medium and the M3 light, something like that? Everybody was kind of in that same boat where light armor, more mobility, you know, more focus put on the mobility than the armor or the guns. You know, the guns were perfectly fine for what they were going to theoretically be facing based on what everyone else was doing at the time. But the main problem with Japanese armor in general is the lack of funding and the lack of materials being given to the tank force, being given to their armored force. Because Japan and its empire at the time really was more naval orientated, a lot of those basic resources that Japan doesn't really have, it needs to import a lot of the resources it needs to build this stuff. It's being given to the Navy. And it's being given to the Navy because they are seen as what they want to be, a naval superpower. So land actions don't really feature as prominently. The infantry is well motivated at the time, you know, in the early war periods, up to and just post Pearl Harbor. The Japanese infantry are very devoted, very motivated to do the job that they've been told to do. Later on, it kind of changes a little bit, and we start to see the fanaticism really sort of sink in with the core elements of the Japanese army. But the armored force really suffers for that. And to be fair, I don't think the Japanese army necessarily needed an armored force. I could be wrong. If they were fighting China and stuff like that, they had mass Soviet-built stuff as well. They used BTs and the likes. So an armored presence was needed. But during the island hopping campaign against the Americans, it really feels like their tanks were so redundant they may as well not have been there. So that's all the tank gibberish I've got on Japanese armored force, because I don't really know that much about it. Tons of YouTube content on it now. Even the chieftain from World of Tanks is starting to look at some Japanese armor. Fascinating stuff as well. Very interesting to see why they designed what they designed and why they built what they built and why they used it the way they did. Anyway, let's get down to the table and let's paint it. So to begin with our Chiha, I've primed in matte black. This once again is using my AK Interactive matte black primer that I've put through an airbrush. So just to get a nice smooth finish on the model straight away before we start adding any colors. So moving on to the first color, we are going to be following the instructions recommended painting that comes in the box. And our base color is going to be Vallejo model color, camouflage olive green. This is going to be our base color, on top of which we're going to put all our camouflage. So again, this is through the airbrush, thinned 2:1. We're going to give it a good strong coat of this. What I'm also going to do is, at this point, remove the turret. And just to show you what I actually do with the turrets on some of these videos, is I take a little crocodile clip on a peg, just clamp that there, and I can just, I'm even going to set it in my water pot, I can just set it anywhere out of the way. So we'll set that out of the way, and now we will start with our green. We'll make sure the airbrush is running, all smooth and all tidy, and then we'll get to applying our green. With our green now down, we'll have a look over the tank. We've got a nice tidy finish, and I know some people are going to say, well, why green as the base color? Because the research shows that the sort of sandy yellow would be the base coat. I'm okay with that. That's fine. I'll take that one on the chin. However, we can narrative our way out of it, I guess. I did want to do it as accurately as possible. And I think I got a little overzealous with just wanting to do a green base coat, which is fine. Typically, these Japanese tanks were painted once and that was it. They were done after that. They never really repainted them. They only repainted the markings. So what you would typically see is maybe quite a weathered looking vehicle with a little patch of colour and a new marking painted over it whenever it changed regiment or changed division or whatever. What I'm saying in this one is this base green was typically reserved for home island defence as well as Japanese Navy tank specific units. They would have been like the amphibious landing forces and stuff like that. So my narrative explanation for having the green base coat, if you really need one, is that this is a vehicle that's been transferred to the Japanese Army from either home island defence or the Navy. There's a bit of research out there on it. There's not a terrible amount of information on Japanese tank colours other than what captured examples showed after the war. So we can take a little bit of liberty with that. So with that relatively weak excuse given to all of you, we're going to move on to our first camouflage, or our first main camouflage colour, and that is going to be Vallejo model colour, desert yellow. So this is going to be our brighter colour. So we're going to put some of this onto my palette over here, and this, much like many camouflage schemes, really needs to perform its task properly before we go in and weather after the fact. So we're going to take this, and what we're going to do is use it to apply broad-ish kind of lines. So let's have a look here on the side of the hull. We'll go from here and we'll draw a line sort of here, and then we'll go up over the hull down this side here and work our way out to about there. We'll then carry it up onto the turret like that, and then we'll join that line there. I know these look a little messy right now, and that's fine. So we'll do that. Then to finish the line off, it doesn't necessarily go over the whole vehicle. We'll, on the top of the turret, make a little bit of a turn up here and let it join back down on this side, and we'll do that way. So we're going to be doing that across the whole vehicle. Make sure this paint's thin enough so I can start applying my layers. So we'll do this across the whole vehicle, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about how the camouflage pans out and where the other colours go. So with our desert yellow now down, we can see that we've got nice big pattern going on here. Probably a little too big, to be fair, but it's still working out for us pretty well. Now we're going to move on to the last colour for the camouflage, and that is going to be Vallejo model colour, flat brown. Not flat earth this time, we're not going down the conspiracy level, but we're going to be using some flat brown. This is going to, as far as the pattern goes, this is going to hug our desert yellow. So I'll just get some of that onto my brush. So for example, we're going to take it on this side of this stripe, move it a little bit closer to the camera, and we're going to roughly follow the desert yellow. Probably keep it a little bit thinner than the desert yellow, so we'll make the stripes just a little bit narrower. Not too much narrower, but just enough. Carry that up and let it continue to follow whatever way things lie. This is why I always put the turret back on, because I get a vague idea of where this color is going to lead. So for example, taking it up like that continues the line a bit more cleanly. And then what I'll do is swoop up this way to join it, while this stripe is going to come down, this side of it anyway is going to come down. And I think we're going to just cut, because I don't like how those stripes have turned out, we're going to cut down through that and create a new stripe here. So this brown is going to come up and probably just finish up there somewhere, and so on and so forth. So we're going to make sure that every desert yellow stripe has a brown one accompanying it. So we now have our camouflage done, and it's looking pretty decent. I've also stuck a couple of decals on, just one on either side of the turret. And I think the camouflage is about as close as it really needs to be, about as neat as it needs to be. They didn't really spray these camouflage patterns on, from what I can see and from what I've read. It just seems to have all been hand painted. So I mean, if it looks a little rough, it makes it look a little bit more accurate, I guess. Now, we have a couple of base coating steps to do here. So the first one is going to be using Vallejo model color black grey. That is going to be for the tires on the wheels and for the machine gun barrels. The next step we're going to use, we might actually do the exhaust as well. The next stage will be Air Leadbelcher from Citadel. This is going to be base coat for the tracks and for the two machine guns as well. We're going to sort of go lightly over the machine guns because we don't really want them to be just solid silver. We want to keep some of that black in the recesses on the barrels. But that's where we're going next. So let's fish out some of our black grey, and we'll start and get these two steps done. So get a bit more water on the brush. And the wheels, the tires, it's just going to be a majority of the black grey across the face of the tire. The only thing we're going to have to be neat with is the edge, because there's a lip where the rubber meets the metal of the wheel. So we're just going to have to be a bit neater with that. But that's no problem. We can go ahead and do this. And when we come back, we should potentially be ready to start some weathering. So with our silver and our black down, we're going to start just a little bit of weathering. I'm not going to go too heavy on this one, I don't think. So what I want to do is take the original base color, the camouflage olive green, and I'm going to do a little bit of a dry brush over our camouflage. This is part of the old mantra that I use, the make it then break it. So make the camouflage work and then ruin it in some way. So that's usually done through weathering. So we're going to do a little bit of a green dry brush to sort of have the paint wearing off edges or chipping away, make it look a bit more like it's a vehicle that's had this camouflage applied later and starting to just sort of chip off. You know, the paint has obviously been applied in a bit of a hurry and it's just starting to wear off. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to do a similar effect again, but we're going to be going back to our Leadbelcher as well. And I'm just going to get the majority of this green paint back off my dry brush. Cool, all right. Obviously it's not a dry brush anymore, is it? So we'll take some of this Leadbelcher, and what we're going to do now is just touch some edges a little bit, just to bring some bare metal to the fore. And I think that should do us for a little bit of chipping and a little bit of the basic levels of weathering. So I think from there, we're going to revisit our AK stuff. And our first stop is my usual favorite, the dark brown wash. So this is going to go over the entire vehicle. I'm going to use a nice sort of larger brush for this one. This is actually a large shade brush, so that works. And what we want to do is just give the whole vehicle maybe not that thick a coat. I'll open up some thinners here as well, and we'll move our Leadbelcher out of the way. We'll get some thinners, and we'll thin it down a little bit. So let's just see how this works out. Add a bit more thinners to my brush than that. We don't want it to look too messy. All right, so this is still drying. There's still a little damp in places, but it's fine for what I want to do next. Because what I want to do next is make a complete mess of the tank. And we have two materials I want to use now, so I'm going to move some stuff out of the way here. So the first one is going to be my old reliable brown dust and dirt deposits from AK. I'm also going to combine that with sand yellow deposits as well, because I want to be a bit more varied this time around. So we're going to give both of these a good shake. We're going to open them both up. I figured because I've done this a bit more with more of the brown, I wanted to go a little bit lighter in spots as well. So we're going to take the brush that we used for applying our dry brushing, and I think we're going to start with a bit of the brown earth deposit first. And what I want to do with that is work it into our suspension in and around here. We're going to need some thinners. We're going to open that. Sorry, holding the brush in my mouth probably isn't the best way. And we're going to work this into our tracks and suspension. Really get it in there. Work it into all our wheels and in and around all our track. And this works sort of as a wash, as well as sort of just applying some of the dust effect. And then with that done, what I'm going to do is try and take some of it a little more lightly over the vehicle. So we're going to stipple it on kind of in patches over the top. Try and keep it nice and thin, not let it gather too much, although I've just done exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. That's fine. We'll just work it in here and we'll just make a nice mess. Now we're going to move on to the sand yellow, and it's going to be the same thing, but we're going to apply it a little differently, I think. So we want to focus mostly on the tracks, on the outer faces of the wheels. A bit more like that. We can sort of afford to be a little bit more heavy and patchy with it. So as you can see, all our pigment work, all our enamel washes are dry. It's now time to start moving it around and removing some of it. So what I'm going to be doing is taking an old frayed dry brush and some of my odorless thinner. So we're going to just open this up and then just going to dip the brush, just dampen it, and then I'm going to poke my wall a little bit. So we want the brush to be just a little damp. We don't want it to be completely soaked. And what we're going to do now is start to shimmy and move this wash around, try and reactivate some of it, and start to remove at least parts of it that we don't like. And then what we're also able to do is streak some of that dirt down the more flat, down the more vertical surfaces. So it reactivates and then it just shifts a little bit. Something a bit more like that. So we can do this as much as we want across the whole vehicle. On our flat surfaces, our upper surfaces, we're basically just going to move it around a little bit. Take some away from certain parts of the vehicle. Make it look a little less tide marky, because it does at the minute the way it's dried. And along here we can try and get it to run down off those rivets a little more. Then up on the top we'll remove some. Again, I think we'll just take the turret off and just have that shift around and then streak down the sides. With the pigment moved around and removed in certain places and the whole vehicle given a matte varnish, our little Chiha is now finished. And yeah, I quite like this little tank. Obviously not the best tank of the war by a long shot. But yeah, it's turned out pretty nice. I do like the camouflage. I like the mix of colours they went with for their schemes. It makes a nice kind of change from the typical German schemes, but you know, in general, it is a charming looking tank, and it does suit this 3-tone. The other tone, or the other scheme they gave in the instruction book, is just a plain green with little Japanese rising suns on it, and it just doesn't make the tank look as good as it could. So this 3-tone scheme, which is definitely one of the more common schemes that they use for the Japanese army, definitely suits it a lot better. So I think that will do us for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this one. Hopefully it's not been too boring for you. I like this one. I like this tank, not because it's a good tank, but because it's different. It's like a relic of the 30s that just had to fight the war it was given, and that was really it. So as always guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and see you again very soon.